has been enjoying it. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Debra Valentina from Creativing. I'm an intuitive business and life coach for female professionals and entrepreneurs, and a very proud host for the Centers for Spiritual Living After Lunch series. So welcome, Ron. It's so great to have you here for our dialogue about artful speaking and your real love for empowering people to tell their stories and share their messages in a very powerful way. So for those of you who are watching now or later, I'd like to introduce you to our very special guest, Ron Ben Joseph. So Ron specializes in coaching people on their content, their presentation skills, and their storytelling. And he has spent the last 15 years empowering professionals in overcoming their fears of sharing their messages and stories by organizing their content into a very tight narrative. And I know that speaking is one of the #1 fears that people have. So it's a very, very useful coaching skill to have. So Ron has worked with Broadway actors as well as heart-centered professionals in a variety of fields, including health, finance, and real estate. So welcome again, Ron. Yay.
Yay, Deb, I adore you.
Well, thank you. So to begin, I'd love to have you share with our audience, what is artful speaking and how does it help people?
That's a great question. So Artful Speaking is it's the name of my coaching practice, and the root of it, the drive of it, is to help people. I do primarily work with female entrepreneurs, so I'd say like 95% of my clients are female entrepreneurs that are so talented at what they do at their craft. They're very successful. A lot of them are, in that 6 to 7 figure range, and they're being told by marketing people, they're being told by everyone that at this point, they need to have more of an online presence, as well as use public speaking to build their business or to create videos where they're speaking directly to their clients, even, without being there in person with the client. So Artful Speaking is all about how to craft that message and how to really get connected to what you want to say and put it into a very clear narrative that is easy for you to see and go, oh my God, I am smart. I am brilliant. Like, look at that. I wrote that, like that makes sense to me. And then free up the voice to do it. So a lot of times throughout our lives, people have told us, don't do that. Don't say that. Or I can't hear you. Why talk louder? Or somehow they've criticized the way we come off. And so I have a slew of kind of really fun, exciting tools that help unlock that voice in a very authentic, organic way. And that's what I help people do is just to be clear about what they want to say and then say it in a way that they're confident and can deliver it on a bad day or a good day. It's very consistent.
Yeah, beautiful. And so well said, because certainly I have been the recipient of your coaching, and absolutely what you just described, that's what you do. So
Thank you.
Great. So
and I love working with you.
Thank you. So when did you first know you were passionate about helping people share their stories, and how did you transform that passion into an actual business?
A great question. So I grew up all over the world. When I was 2, my family moved us to Melbourne, Australia from Israel. And I always say I'm from Israel, but I'm not political. And, I have great Palestinian friends. I think it is important for me to put that out there. One of my best friends, she's a Palestinian comic, and we always joke about it and stuff. But so I grew up, born in Israel. When I was 2 years old, we moved to Melbourne, Australia. And throughout that time, we would travel back and forth all over the world a lot. And then when I was 9, we moved to a suburb of Chicago called Highland Park. And throughout that time, I never felt like I belonged. I never felt like I was of one place or another. So my mom, who's very Israeli, identifies as Israeli, She barely speaks English. I mean, she speaks English, but she is very broken. And she still maintains a really strong connection with Israel. I don't have that connection. When I'm in Israel, people speak to me as if I'm American. In America, I'm not like, I have foreign parents. I speak a different language too. Like, I don't feel right at home. I don't. So for me, this notion of like fitting in was never a concept, or even having, we were talking before about the Center of Spiritual Living, accepting people on all levels. I never felt like I was of one religion or another. So whenever we were in a new place, my dad would always say, go, let's like go to the local restaurant or whatever, go to like a local place and just ask questions, like listen to people talk, get a sense of the community that way. And that really struck me. That really stuck with me. And I was like, so I remember like, even at like, 7 or 8 years old, striking conversations with the wait staff at a restaurant in LA or in South Africa or Greece or whatever. And I was so fascinated with other people's cultures and other people's stories, and people felt comfortable sharing, and I would ask questions and stuff. And maybe they thought it was just cool that there's this like 7-year-old asking them all these questions. I remember once in Greece, my mom dropped me off. We were in Greece, like we stayed in Greece for a couple of days on our way to Israel. And my mom dropped me off at like a statue maker's store. And I was there for like hours. She just like left. And she wasn't, I don't know, she thought I was safe. She was like, it's fine. But I remember I sat with this guy and he told me he would walk through every statue that he was making, every thing, telling me about all the Greek gods. And I was in heaven. I was like, I love stories. So at that time, at 7, 8 years old, in my head, the only conclusion is, well, I'm gonna be a storyteller. I'm gonna be a filmmaker. I'm gonna be a director, a theater. And I love theater. I love movies. I'm a child of the 80s, so like, who doesn't love movies in the 80s? Yeah, Star Wars and Superman. So I'm like, I'm gonna be a filmmaker, right? So I go to so we moved to Chicago. I grow up. I go to high school. We have a very awesome theater department at the high school. A lot of famous people have come from my high school. And I get in there and I come in with my arrogance and my learning disabilities and my like lack of confidence and all of these, it's a perfect storm, and I don't make any shows for the first few years. And I'm like, I took all the classes and I don't get cast in anything, and it devastated me. It just destroyed me. I was like, but I'm supposed to be this great director. This is my path. I thought this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I had to learn to chill the hell out and like be humbled and work for some, like really actually not just have things handed to me, but like really like just stop and just work step by step to get better at something and to learn to transition and transform ultimately. And at the time I was very heavy. And so I was like, well, I lost weight. I got my grades up, and senior year of high school, I made every show and got really awesome technique in producing and directing and acting and stuff. And I never wanted to go through that again. I never wanted, like, I was like, I never want to be the low man on the totem pole again. And while all my friends were getting cast and me just be left in the cold. So I went to college, but I was like, I want to start my own thing. So I started calling at 19. I picked up an American Theater magazine. And in the back of the American Theater magazine, there was a list of all these theaters all over the country. And I called the theater company in Boston. I don't know why. But one in Boston, I was like, hey, how do you become an assistant director? And they were like, first, you got to be an intern. I was like, what's that? Like, I'd never heard that word. Intern? What? So I was like, oh, I got to get an internship. Following day, I called like every theater in Chicago, set up meetings, and again, I barely graduated high school. I was not a good student. I was in college, but I was liberal arts degree. I wasn't even a theater major. I was a psychology major. And I was like, I got to work in theater. So within a month, I had meetings set up at all these big theaters in Chicago. I had offers for internships that turned into assistantships. And all the while I'm producing my own shows and raising money, learning to raise money. So I'm like, well, I'm working with these people and they see me as an assistant. I want them to see me as a director. I started directing, producing shows, putting money into it, losing money, doing all this stuff. But the shows were like solid. So like definitely a mess on the inside, like trying to get the show up. But there was a natural aptitude to get on the phone with people. And there was a natural aptitude to create opportunities and to actually coach and get really solid performances. And so I was like, well, there's something here, And in that time, I went to school in New York for a little bit as an actor. I graduated college, went to school, acting school for a little bit, came back, and really just tried to find my way as an artist. And I felt so depleted. I didn't have the words for it at the time, but I felt so depleted by actors. It was just such a hard process for me to work with actors, and these were really talented. Some of them are like Tony Award-winning actors now and everything. And I was just drained. I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't have the inner strength or the groundedness to deal with their energies and stuff. And so I was like, well, what's like another form of this? Like, I was like, what's acting for non-actors? That seems like that's exactly what I would want to do, is teach acting, all the amazing stuff we've learned in theater studies and theater training, and teach that to non-actors who could use it in sales and business and speaking, public speaking. So got my master's and started teaching public speaking. And then I was like, okay, this is the show. This is it. So here I'm combining creating opportunities, combining performance by being on stage in front of these students, and combining coaching. So I would do a lot of spotlight coaching in my classes. So that was kind of where I really started tapping into, oh yeah, this is it. And I should say too, there was one more story when I was directing. I took a directing class with a director who I really liked, very, very talented guy. And I remember he watched me direct a scene in class, and there was a scene where there's two people and this woman walks in with a book. And not to be annoying, but I felt like that book was the beginning of the conversation in the scene. So her and I spent maybe 15 minutes talking about the book. And it wasn't like when you hear stories of directors being like, I want you to, for the next 5 hours, just practice going like, it wasn't like that. It was like we were discussing her character and everything and who she is. And afterwards, the teacher said to me, you spent 15 minutes on that thing with the book. He's like, every one of those ideas that you guys came up with was genius. It was brilliant. But are you coaching the actor or are you coaching the character? Because the character has one of those possibilities. And I was like, oh, I don't care about the character. I care about the actress. I'm like, I want her to be super confident and super free to create and sparkle in the scene. And she had to do a bunch of dramatic stuff in the scene. So I wanted her to feel free. That's why I did that. And he's like, yeah, that's not directing. And I was like, oh. So that planted the seed where I cared more about the actor than the character. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So I love this because first of all, I've not ever heard all of this, background on how you got to being, a brilliant speech coach. And I know that as the recipient of your coaching, I totally get that you want me to, whenever I'm speaking or on video, to be brilliant. So I think you chose right. Coaching versus the directing. Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And since I know that you're a very funny guy, I am wondering how you teach people to incorporate humor in when they're sharing their stories and messages, because I think that's really important to include humor. So how do you teach people to do that?
So there's like two parts to this answer. I'll try to keep it quick. But something that actually I think you and I talked about is with humor, there's a very clear response, right? Humor is a great tool to engage people, to help them feel that they can relate on a more emotional level to your content. So when I use humor, I don't make fun of, I call it making fun from. So we unearth the discomfort, the thing that is, like the purple elephant in the room or whatever. But that thing that is standing in the way of us getting what we want, we unearth that, the gritty, the thing we dislike, and then we find a hook that is relatable. So like Mel Brooks, I think he described comedy perfectly. Mel Brooks, the filmmaker and comedian, he said he's like the way comedy works. He's like, if I see a man slip on a banana peel, fall down a manhole and die, I'm laughing my ass off for weeks. If I get a paper cut, my day is ruined. And I love that story. I'm like, to me, that's humor, right? Is that it's like we contextualize it with a distance. So we use humor to kind of detach from the hurt, from the pain, from the paper cut, and we make it external. And then thereby we can all collectively look at this other thing and relate better to the actual substance, to the actual conflict that exists in that scenario that we've all experienced maybe, right? So I think humor is incredibly relatable. I think it's easy to connect with. And where people fall, or where people, I don't say fall short, where people get scared or constrict around is the outcome. So in the same way that you and I, we've talked about how it's hard for us to embrace our own brilliance. Like, I don't, people say it's fun. I don't, like, I'm not gonna be funny today, but like when I do a show now and it's consistently funny, and that took me years of training, and that's kind of where I felt like, oh, I can start teaching this stuff, is when I was able to do a show, no matter how I was going through a divorce, or my daughter maybe was mad at me that day or something, or I didn't make enough money that week or something, whatever it was, I could still get on stage and like everything would just be simple. I know exactly what I need to do. And some shows were funnier than others, but I knew exactly how to get the laugh. I was like, the minute that happened, I was able to realize that, like, it's okay. So I could see where people think I'm funny, but I can't experience it. So how do I get others who can't experience their greatness or how they're being funny to be in control of it, to kind of ride on top of the wave? And so the way we do that is by, like, again, detaching, by looking at almost creating a mask of sorts. So like, how do you want to be perceived and how do you want this to land? And then kind of backpedaling, like reverse engineering. So if you want them to laugh about this, what is it? What's tragic about it? What's hurting them about this? And then what's laughing going to do? So we really break it down, and then we use comedy techniques that are very basic, like set up punchline, all that stuff. I like to call it set up a conflict and resolve it. But we use a lot of tools that we use in comedy where we really like make things extreme. Like, I think you and I worked on a joke where it was something like, "Is it okay if I use this?"
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of you were talking about your, like, where you went to school.
Right.
And like the way you described it to me, or like, I went here, but I also went there, and like both of them were like amazing, And so I was like, oh, well, let's add like what we're all anticipating you to be like. Yeah, I went to this Ivy League school for my master's. What, and that, but you did it in a way with humility, where it was like we were relating to you because you had achieved something great that we all want to achieve, and yet you realized, like, it came off a little boasty and a little sassy, and so we use humor like that, where it's relatable and it's respectful, versus all those dumb people that didn't go to Harvard.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I know for me in terms of the humor is you have to use the personality you're working with. Not everybody has the same sense of humor. So I love that about your ability to help people with their comedy in their stories. So because we're almost at time, I can't believe it, but I'm wondering what one tip or guidance that you would share with our audience if they wanted to share their story or message. Like, what would be your top tip?
My absolute top tip is set up a conflict. So I've had people say, oh, I want to talk about, oh, I have this amazing story. And a lot of times that amazing story is truly harrowing. It's awesome. They've slayed the dragon. They've overcome their inner demons and whatnot. But to make it really impactful to others, you have to extract the story. I mean, sorry, you have to extract the story, obviously. You have to extract the conflict. What is the conflict? And make it in your head something that is much more general and much more adaptable to other people. So if it's a matter of like getting over an addiction, right? So instead of it just being a story about you and your alcohol, your journey with alcohol and moving past it, what if it's like, look at it as, I was addicted because of these reasons, and then you make those reasons relatable. You make those reasons more adaptable for others, where they can see themselves in your story. So I always have people start with a question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where? Well, I found myself in that situation, and here's how I got over it, and here's how you can get over it. So having a clear conflict, I think, makes it more relatable for everyone, but it makes it easy for us to go, oh, that's my story too, versus just someone else talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes it engaging and people wanting to hear how the how the conflict was resolved. So they're going to listen long enough to hear how it was resolved. So I could go on and on. Unfortunately, we're at the near the end of our time. I'm wondering how people can learn more about artful speaking, because I'm sure there will be some in the audience that will want to know more.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they have like presentations, or if even they're doing anything online right now where they have to do blogs or vlogs or come up with content and they're just like overwhelmed, they're like, I don't even know where I start with this thing. Email me. We have conversation. We'll bring all that stuff out of you and put it into really palpable mediums that you feel comfortable distributing throughout life, throughout online. But definitely check out artfulspeaking.com. As of right now, that is a work in progress. I'm making some changes. I've had it up for a few years and I'm changing some of the language and stuff. Or you could email me at ron@artfulspeaking.com, ron@artfulspeaking.com. And I would love to talk to you if you are a heart-centered person that wants to share from a positive place, in an excited, passionate place, but don't know yet, or maybe have had bad experiences sharing and you want to just get that edge. Please email me. I'd love to talk to you.
And both the email and the artfulspeaking.com will be in the chat, so people will have it in writing. So thank you, Ron, for so much for sharing your passion about artful speaking. And I know that you could share lots more wisdom, but I hope people got a really good snippet of how they can improve on their speaking. So before signing off, if you're interested in publishing your message or story, I'd like to share that the Centers for Spiritual Living publishing department actually has a self-publishing division called Part Point Press. And so you can get more information by emailing selfpublish@csl.org. Again, that's self-publish. It's not ing, it's self-publish@csl.org. So self-publish@csl.org. That will also be in the chat. And thank you all for joining us today. And please join us next Tuesday, September 29th, at the same time, 1:30 Mountain Time. So that's September 29th at 1:30 Mountain Time, as the After Lunch series continues, and Reverend Karen Wilson will be interviewing our very own Reverend Sonia Byrne, the Executive Director of the Centers for Spiritual Living at the Home Office. Thank you again.